Satyamayi Parame Satyamayi Parame Satyamayi Parame Satyam Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyotir Aravinda Satyam Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyotir Aravinda Satyam Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyotir Aravinda Jyotir Aravinda Jyotir Aravinda. So all of us have heard about Krishna's flute, right? So what does Krishna's flute symbolize? What is Krishna's flute a metaphor for? It could be his instrument to play, but classically? Harmony. The sound of Krishna's flute is joy, is the attraction the divine exerts on the human soul. So they say the call of the flute, and it's typified in Krishna's story where he used to just play the flute, and there are endearing stories of how the gopis and gopas, the moment he would start playing, they would drop everything. They would leave their half work undone, leave everything and just rush around him. And then Krishna was asked that you play the flute and the whole village hears you. How come only some people go mad hearing your flute? You're playing, everyone hears it. Why does it not attract everyone? So Krishna answers that I'm calling everyone. My call is to everyone. I'm playing the flute so that everyone can hear it. But there are only some people whose hearts are open enough to respond to the call and come to me. So there's that beautiful line in Savitri, if the chamber's door is even a little ajar, what then can hinder God from stealing in, or who forbid his kiss on the sleeping soul? But the problem is we need to have our chamber's door that little bit open, like the gopis and gopas. They would hear the flute and they'd come running, but it's not like everyone in the village would be able to do that because they hadn't opened their doors. So I want you to think for a moment, how has each of us heard the call of the flute? The call of the flute is the attraction of the human soul to the divine, that occult attraction, that invisible attraction. So when do you feel you could have heard it? If you need a backrest, you can come here. When do you feel you could have heard it? Or when was the first time anyone heard it? See, there's a very beautiful line in the song Amazing Grace. how precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. The first time you felt that, yeah, there is something beyond, and you felt a pull to reach out for it. How many of you can recollect the first time, even if you can? Would anyone like to share? No? Yes, come. They'll be able to hear you. Yeah, speak.
The first time I experienced consciousness was I was going for a walk with a friend, and back then I didn't know anything about spirituality. I was going through anxiety neurosis, I remember back then. We were both very quiet.
Huh.
Yeah. We were both very quiet then. We were walking through a forest, and it's very difficult to put into words. So there came a stage where both of us were quiet, and then I started looking at a tree, fixed my gaze there, and suddenly I felt like I am that tree. Then the tree next to it, and a point came where I felt like I was the entire forest. So that was my first experience. It lasted for about 5 to 6 minutes, not too long, but it was beautiful, to lose your sense of self for that time. And then suddenly, then I came back to myself, back to the anxiety.
But something in you would have shifted for good after that. Something.
Of course. After that, there was that yearning to feel that thing once again, to experience that oneness once again.
Yeah.
So it has, I am chasing that. I don't know when I will get it.
Don't chase it. See, when you weren't looking for it, it came to you.
True.
Beautiful. So, the call of the flute comes to us in different ways, and Sri Aurobindo tells us that if man could once glimpse the riches of spiritual treasure that await him, he would leave everything and want nothing else. Like the Gopas and Gopis, when Krishna played the flute, they just left everything. They didn't care whether the in-laws would be upset, whatever would happen, they would just come. So, that as Krishna says, he's playing the flute for everyone, but do we have an opening in our heart to hear it and come, or are we always choosing the call of the world over the call of the flute? So now Mother's words. A question a sadhak puts to her: Sweet Mother, I have concentrated very much on that flame, the psychic being. But alas, my aspiration has not been strong enough to light it. A sadhak is telling Mother. So Mother replies, it is not your work to light the fire. As I told you, I am always lighting it. You have only to open yourself to receive it and tend it with your goodwill. So beautiful. Like Krishna says, he is always playing the flute. Mother is always lighting the fire, but we have to open ourselves to receive it and tend it with our goodwill. And what tends this Agni or this fire in our hearts the most is actually cheerfulness, goodwill and happiness. What clouds this psychic flame the most from our vision is our tendency to grumble in our mind, our tendency to say this is bad, that is bad. That clouds us from hearing the call of the flute. The call of the flute is playing in our heart all the time, in a sense, isn't it? But just the way at some gopis respond and rest of the villagers don't, at some moments of our life we respond to it, at some moments we don't. But the flute is playing all the time, and it's so beautiful. A disciple of Sri Aurobindo, Dilip Kumar Roy, you all must have heard of him. He was a great devotee of Krishna, and towards the end of his life, when he was like in a lot of pain and physical whatever, but he was in bliss. His body was going to pieces, but he used to tell everyone who came to him, I'm hearing the flute playing all the time. I don't want anything else. I'm just so content. So it's possible even when the body is going through so much agony, which he was towards the last few days, but he was not unhappy. He was the happiest when the body was going through whatever it was, because he said, I'm just hearing the flute playing all the time. So now, internal state of cheerfulness, Sri Aurobindo's words, hasyam is the active side of sukham. Hasyam is laughter, is the active side of sukham. Sukham is joy. It consists in an active internal state of gladness and cheerfulness, which no adverse experience, mental or physical, can trouble. Its perfection is God's stamp and seal on the siddhi of samata. Samata is equality. So equality can be very dry, but then it's short-lived. The real equality is the equality which is full of laughter. Now, in history, the one figure which is the epitome of equality is the Buddha, right? And if you'll always see a half smile on the Buddha's face, the real equality is always by nature smiling. It is an internal being. It is in our internal being the image of the smile of Sri Krishna playing Balavat as the eternal Balak and Kumar in the garden of the world. Sense of humor, Sri Aurobindo asks, it is the salt of existence. What does salt do to food? It makes it tasty, right? You'll not enjoy the most delicious dish if it doesn't have salt. So if you don't have a sense of humor, you can't enjoy life. Sense of humor is the salt of existence. So don't get terribly serious. Hold on to your sense of humor. Without it, the world would have got utterly out of balance. It is unbalanced enough already and rushed to blazes long ago. It is not necessary to be always serious of face or silent in doing the yoga, but it is necessary to take the yoga seriously. And silence and inward concentration have a large place. One can't be all the time throwing oneself outward if to go inside and meet the divine there is one's aim. So he's saying apparently contradictory things. He's saying that you have to always be joking and laughing in your demeanor, but that doesn't mean you don't take yoga seriously. If you see many of the sages, they were full of laughter and fun. If you see Sri Aurobindo's humor, his correspondence with Nirodharan, he is hilarious. You just have to read about, there's a book called Sri Aurobindo's Humor. You'll never imagine the kind of wit he had. Or anyone else who is really on the spiritual path, they don't get heavier and heavier. If you're getting heavier and heavier, you're on the wrong path. The more you walk the path of spirituality, the lighter you become. You don't become heavy and serious and dense. But that doesn't mean you don't take the yoga seriously. In your heart, your aim is very serious. Now, in laughing and joking, if you forget about your goal because you sort of got so lost in the vital titillation of it, then that's also, it's like a razor's edge. I'm not getting lost in that laughter, but I'm using that laughter to come closer to the smile within. If I'm getting lost in that laughter, then that also I'm losing the aim. So, let the sweetness and happy feeling increase, for they are the strongest sign of the soul and the psychic being awake and in touch with us. Let not mistakes of thought or speech or action disturb you. Put them away from you as something superficial, with the power and light will deal with and remove. Keep to the one central thing, your soul, and these higher realities it brings with them. So even if you've made mistakes of thoughts or speech or action, push them away from you. Don't dwell on them too much. That will be dealt with by the divine in its own time. You keep focusing only on the divine. Try to be happy, Mother says. Immediately you will be closer to the light. So beautiful. Whenever you're not feeling connected, just try to be happy. The moment you make yourself happy, you'll feel closer to the light. So simple, no? Now the question is, how do I make myself happy when I'm unhappy? Right? We feel that if I connect, then I'll be happy. But it's also true that if I'm not happy, it's more difficult to connect, right? So then what do I do?
Is it like, when you are unhappy also, try and put a smile on your face?
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it kind of thing?
Yeah. That could be one way if it works, but it may not work for everyone. So beautifully said, no? Your only protection through any and every circumstance of life is spiritual wisdom, right? So draw on spiritual wisdom. You're unhappy because you're buying into the story your mind has created about your life or a person or a circumstance, which is spelling doom and pain and unhappiness for you. But it's only a story in your head, right? Beyond the story, there's another reality. Sri Aurobindo says it so beautifully, in God's providence, there is no bad. Every seeming bad or evil is good in the making. So if you remind yourself of that itself, you won't believe that story your mind is creating. And very often, 2 days later, 1 hour later, you'll see that story was absolute crap. There was no truth to it. We've all experienced that, no? We get into a dark mood because we are so convinced of that person's intention. We are so convinced that this situation will go like that, and I'm full of fear. But 9 out of 10 times we are wrong. What we worry about never really happens. So why wait to say in hindsight that I was wrong? The moment that negative story comes, just remind yourself it's just a, you can come here, Isha. It's just a story in my head, and that's all. Again, I keep reminding you of Sri Aurobindo's words. In the final analysis, you need to know only 2 things. You have a soul within and grace above. Forget everything else. Or like we did last class, Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakto, see me in everything. If everything is God, then God knows what He's doing in every circumstance and every form, right? I have to make that leap of faith. Carl Jung, who was the father of Western psychology, said something so beautiful. Of all the people who came to me, not one believed. You know, he treated people with mental illnesses. He meant to say that if they had believed, they wouldn't have gone into mental illness, right? If they really had a strong faith and they believed, that faith would have saved them from the anxiety and whatever else which made them go downhill. So yeah, if you remember that, if you draw on your spiritual wisdom and you remind yourself to be happy again, that's all Mother wants from you. You keep yourself happy and my force will do the rest. But if you cloud your consciousness with unhappiness and despondency, then even if my force wants to come and save you, your consciousness is not letting my force enter, right? Like the story at the beginning where the rest of the village couldn't hurt Krishna's flute, but it was just a sound. It wasn't something that would make them drop everything and run to him. So, try to be happy. Immediately you will be closer to the light. Every class, Mother actually gives us sutras of integral yoga. Make this a sutra for this class. Try to be happy, immediately you will be closer to the light. And the most essential quality is perseverance, endurance. And what shall I call it? A kind of inner good humor which helps you not to get discouraged, not to become sad, and to face all difficulties with a smile. There is an English word which expresses this very well, cheerfulness. What is cheerfulness? to face all difficulties with a smile. If you can keep this within you, you fight much better, resist much better, and in the light, these bad influences which try to hinder you from progressing. So beautiful. Cheerfulness is the ability to hold. You know, last class we said that all healing is a loss of your inner smile, and all illness is a loss of your inner smile, and all healing is recovering it. Now, this inner smile is the smiling faith in God. Not just that He exists, but big deal, blah, my life still sucks. Not like that. If I can say my life is still so terrible, but there is God, then which God am I talking about? Because my life is an unfoldment of God, right? My life is a sort of working out of God in me, around me, everywhere. So, cheerfulness comes from actually a deep heart recognition of this, that everything around me, inside me, above me, everywhere is this intelligence which is all loving, all powerful, all knowing. And if everything is that, if the reins of my life are in the hands of an intelligence which loves me unconditionally, and that intelligence is all powerful and all knowing, obviously at every moment it's doing what's best for me, right? Anything else my mind tells me is my imagination. So I have to keep reminding myself of that truth, and that brings the cheerfulness and smile to my heart.
I have a question, and no doubt what you're saying is the truth. But even in that moment, why do you sometimes feel like it's not a rejection, it's not even not an acceptance, but you get fed up?
You get fed up of the continual lashes.
No,
Okay.
at that particular moment.
Okay, so the question is that when things get very difficult, you know God exists and you know everything, but there's a feeling of being fed up. Now, how much more? How much to go on? How much to keep struggling, right? That's a legitimate question. We all feel that. Well, it's normal to feel that. Do you need a chair? It's normal to feel that, but let it pass. Your vital is throwing a tantrum, and that's legitimate. But open the vital to the psychic light. Allow it to say what it has to, but don't take its words very seriously. It's okay to feel that, we are human. But after that, connect in your heart and remind yourself, and let the psychic light go to the vital till its tantrum settles down. How do you open your vital to the psychic light? So, see, it's always about building a bridge. The vital is like a universe existing, and the psychic is like another universe existing. It's like there are two universes existing simultaneously. I told you this last time, that all of us live in parallel universes. One is the universe made of our mind and our emotions, and one is the universe Krishna talks about in the Gita, when nothing moves without his sanction. Now, if you live in that universe, you chill, you have nothing to do, he's going to do everything. But the vital is the other universe, where your mind and your emotions are saying, my God, I have to do this to survive, I have to pull, I have to tug, I have to protect, I have to struggle to keep myself safe. Now, both these universes exist simultaneously, but there's no bridge between the two, right? So, when I'm in the vital universe, when my mind is throwing out all those anxieties and fears and whatever, if at that time I make even that little attempt to enter the psychic universe, and I try and feel both simultaneously feeling both creates the bridge. If you know what I mean, you're feeling that I'm fed up, I'm tired, I can't take this anymore, And you go into the heart and you start feeling glimpses of the other universe. You start hearing the call of the flute. And the moment that arises, that placates the vital. If you have a feeling for the mother, like a child loves the mother, however terrible the vital is, it will listen to the mother. If you offer it the mother, it will listen. So do different things, but build that bridge between the vital and the heart. Never grumble, the mother says. All sorts of forces enter you when you grumble and they pull you down. That's the whole point. Krishna's flute is playing all the time, and you have the choice of being those gopis constantly gathering around him and listening to him. Or you have the choice of being that villager who hears the flute and says, no big deal, I'll carry on with my work. Now, if you're in course of that work and you meet with troubles, you've ignored the flute, so the flute can't bail you out, right? Whereas if you have the heart of a gopi, whatever you're going through, if you just listen, you'll hear the call of the flute and it'll bring a smile to your heart. And you'll do whatever you have to happily. So never grumble. All sorts of forces enter you when you grumble and they pull you down. Keep smiling. I seem always to be joking, but it is not mere joking. It is a confidence born from the psychic, so very beautiful. The mother didn't not have her set of troubles. If you read her stories, she had more than our share. Sri Aurobindo says that don't think that the mother and I have lived in some paradise. We have suffered 100 times more than you, and we chose to suffer that so that we could tell you what to do when you suffer. If we hadn't, we couldn't speak your language. So she's saying, but she was always smiling. No matter what she went through, mother was always and always smiling. So she says, I seem always to be joking, but it's not mere joking. It's a confidence born from the psychic. No matter what the appearance, the psychic gives me confidence that I'm going to be fine. That if I've been taken to it, I'll be taken through it. That somehow in the end, everything will work out. I'm going to be patient. I'm going to keep my faith, and I'm not going to lose my heart. A smile expresses the faith that nothing can stand against the divine, and that everything will come out all right in the end. Just be quiet, feel the smile in your heart, and listen to this beautiful, simple line. A smile expresses the faith that nothing can stand against the divine, and everything will come out all right in the end. Actually think of something that's bothering you just now and draw on this smile in your heart and repeat this sentence in your heart. A smile expresses the faith that nothing can stand against the divine, and that everything will come out all right in the end. And one more time. A smile expresses the faith that nothing can stand against the divine. A smile expresses the faith that nothing can stand against the divine, and that everything will come out all right in the end. You should learn up these simple sentences by the mother and repeat them. You know, like this one, a smile expresses, and the other one, that be happy, you will immediately be closer to the light. So if you just repeat these few sentences in your moments, it would help. The very nature of the soul is divine delight, constant, unvarying, unconditioned and ecstatic. So there is something inside you which is constantly happy. It's full of delight, constant, unvarying, unconditioned, ecstatic. Open yourself to the new light that has dawned upon earth, and a luminous path will spread in front of you, the sunlit path which Mother and Sri Aurobindo have paved for all humanity. But just the way a few gopis respond to the call of the flute, a few of humanity will choose to walk the sunlit path. The sunlit path is a path lit up with inner faith and smile. It's not the path of rigorous tapasya and asceticism. It's the path of a happy child being led by its mother. It's happy because the mother is looking after everything. No joy is comparable to the feeling of the eternal presence in one's heart. So beautiful. No joy is comparable to the feeling of the eternal presence in one's heart. The only way to true and lasting happiness is a complete and exclusive reliance on the Divine's grace. The only way to true and lasting happiness, again you can listen to this and say okay, but if you let it enter you deeply, it's a gem. The only way to true and lasting happiness is a complete and exclusive reliance on the Divine's grace, not relying on anyone else, anything else, relying only on the Divine. For your happiness, for your joy, for your safety, to depend only on the Divine. To feel deeply, intensely and constantly a total gratitude towards the Divine is the best way to be happy and peaceful. To feel deeply, intensely and constantly a total gratitude to the Divine is the best way to be happy and peaceful. So we never associate gratitude with happiness, right? But Mother says gratitude is a vibration very slightly different from love. When you feel love, you're automatically happy. When you genuinely feel grateful to the Divine, you can't not be happy, isn't it? It's only when you're grumbling, you haven't given me this, you haven't given me that, others have this, I don't have that. That ingratitude is what makes you unhappy, because you're looking at the half full glass. Well, why not look at all the blessings the Divine has given you and is constantly giving you? And even the difficulties in your life are actually the grace of the Divine, right? Because sometimes it's the difficulties that pull you to sessions like this, right? Otherwise, many of you are young people, you'd prefer to spend your Saturday evenings going out with friends, right? But obviously, for many of us, there might be some pain, something which brings you to a space like this. So that is also grace. Even your difficulties are grace. Check pessimism in your thoughts as much as you can and become a voluntary optimist. This is very, very important. Become a voluntary optimist. And even Rishi Patanjali talks about this. He calls it the Pratipaksha Bhavanam, where he says whenever a negative thought arises, know that a negative thought wave is klishta in nature. Klishta thought wave is something that takes you away from your truth. That's what Mother is saying, no? If happy thoughts bring you closer to the light, unhappy thoughts take you away from your truth or light. So every klishta vritti is a thought, raise an opposite aklishta vritti, a non-pain giving thought. So every time a negative thought comes, oh, I'm going to fail, oh, this is going to happen, combat it with a positive thought that no, I'm going to do my best, the universe will do the rest, that there is whatever works for you. But every moment be committed to not buying into the negative thought. Then some kids tell me that, but aren't we imagining? because I'm feeling this, but I'm inviting myself to imagine the opposite, right? But isn't your negative thought also imagination? Can you be convinced it's the truth? It's your imagination. So if you're going to use negative thoughts to bring you down, and they are equally imagination, why not use positive thoughts to bring you up? So that's a commitment you have to make. Become a voluntary optimist. Don't shelter a single negative thought in you. Every time a negative thought comes, change it to a positive one. Real happiness is of divine origin. It is pure and unconditioned. Ordinary happiness is of vital origin. It is impure and depends on circumstance. So beautiful. Ordinary happiness is the happiness you get depending on circumstances. I'll be happy only if I'm with these people. I'll be happy only if I'm doing this activity. So it's conditioned. But the real happiness is your original nature, is of divine origin. It is pure and unconditioned. Yeah, like what you felt in the forest. It is so good to be simple, simply good-willed, to do the best one can and in the best way possible, not to build anything very considerable, but only to aspire for progress, for light, a peace full of goodwill, and let that which knows in the world decide for you what you will become and what you will have to do. She's saying such a beautiful thing. We are haunted by our ambitions, right? We are haunted by our urge to reach this goal, this target, and the anxiety that if I don't reach there, what will happen? But Mother's giving us such a beautiful solution. Be simple, simply good-willed, and do the best you can in the best way possible. Not to build anything very considerable. So don't be a slave of your ambitions, is what she's saying. But only aspire for progress. We want outer progress, outer status. But Mother says aspire for inner progress, for light, a peace full of goodwill, and then let that which knows, the divine intelligence in the world, decide for you what you will become and what you will have to do. One no longer has any cares and one is perfectly happy, but very difficult to make this change, right? We've been so conditioned from the time we were in lower KG. You can come here. Come. We are so conditioned from the time we are young that you have to get this grade, you have to get this rank, you have to be better than others, that it becomes our goal in life, that I'll kill myself, I'll go to pieces, let my body get damaged, let my emotions go to pieces, but I must achieve that goal, I must be better than others, whatever. But that's where we have to unlearn this conditioning. The real achievement is for me, after doing something, my success depends on the consciousness I come out of it with. If I've achieved a lot externally, but I've come out of it feeling either egoistic or exhausted or tired, for me it's a failure. Because these external failures will come and go. They are circles in the sand. They'll be wiped out by the next wave of life. But the residue in your consciousness that is left, and Patanjali calls it the karma shay, the imprints in your consciousness, those are what are eternal or relatively eternal, not the outer success. So can we redefine our goal? That let me do things in a way that the end of it I'm changed for the better, not for the worse. That I come out of it feeling connected to the Mother, I come out of it feeling energized, and that's the one sign of your consecration. After doing something, if you're exhausted, you've done it from your ego. But if you've done it in surrender to the mother and let her float through you, you'll be full of energy at the end of doing it. So that is really the parameter. I mean, that's my advice. You choose what parameters you could live with, but it's a parameter which works. So that's what she's saying. Do what you have to the best you can, and let that which knows in the world decide for you what you will become and what you will have to do. One no longer has any cares and one is perfectly happy. Question: Mother, how can one learn of pure delight? Mother says, first of all, to begin with, one must, through an attentive observation, grow aware that desires and the satisfaction of desires give only a vague, uncertain pleasure, mixed, fugitive, and altogether unsatisfactory. That is usually the starting point. So, all our lives is about fulfilling desires, right? And that's not wrong. And yet, the Buddha in his Four Noble Truths has said the key to lasting happiness is overcoming desires, but not suppressing them. Sri Aurobindo's way is never a way of suppressing desire, because that dries up the vital. And Sri Aurobindo says the vital is very important in my yoga. I don't want dried, shriveled up vitals. I want a transformed vital. So, a mother saying that to begin with, you will realize that to start with, your goal will be, I want this, if I get it, I'll be happy. So all my life energies move towards getting it, which is fine. But very often you'll find that if you don't get it, you go to the other end of being miserable. And if you get it, you get attached to it, you want it again and again, and when it's not there, you are unhappy. So Mother says this is the starting point, when you realize that, yeah, our fulfillment of desire is really worth chasing. It's one more pleasure, one more pain, it's one more circle in the sand, which will get washed away. So that's the starting point. Mother says, then if one is a reasonable being, and she's saying this is all intelligent, it's spiritual logic. Then if one is a reasonable being, one must learn to discern what is desire and refrain from doing anything that may satisfy one's desire. So maybe this is too much for us, especially when we are younger. But at least some desires which are not very important, try not to fulfill them, but in a conscious way, not by suppressing them. One must reject them without trying to satisfy them. And so the first result is exactly one of the first observations stated by the Buddha in his teachings. There is an infinitely greater delight in conquering and eliminating a desire than satisfying it. It's so beautiful. There is an infinitely greater delight in conquering and eliminating a desire than in satisfying it. Because when you satisfy desires, your ego comes in front. When the ego comes in front, the self retreats. Right? But when you overcome a desire, the self comes forward, and the nature of the self is joy. So I'm not saying to suppress it. To suppress it will make you miserable. But if you can, so how do we do this? I really want something, and I'm fully convinced that only if I get it, I will be happy. So how do I overcome this desire? One way is surrender it to the mother. You can honestly tell her, Mother, I want this, but I know that once I've told you this, if it's good for me, you'll give it to me. If it's not good for me, then give me the faith and resilience to let go of my desire for it. That's one way. What could be another way?
I have one question. The idea of overcoming desires, which we are always saying we overcome desires. But has it not left us materially so poor?
Has it not?
Has it not left us materially so poor and so weak as a society as a whole?
So
that today when a billion of people are dying in Bangladesh, we are not even able to articulate in our society, or the people are not able to articulate and stand up. This is something absolutely wrong which is happening.
But that's not about desire. That is apathy. We are full of desires for ourselves, but we don't really have a desire for the greater common good, right? So we need to change our desires. That's what Mother's saying, transform the nature of desire. You can't say even one of us doesn't have desires for ourselves, but we don't have the wideness to have similar desires for the world around us. Yeah?
I think what he's saying is that there's one whole theory, I don't know who has written it, it says that the reason why India fell.
Yeah, I know what Sri Aurobindo himself has written about this, that the original asceticism that India had, that Buddhism brought in, that Vedanta brought in, dried her up. So that's why, whereas earlier thought would say the world is an illusion, chuck it and dry up, Sri Aurobindo is saying the world is not illusion, the world is a body, is the body of Lord, embrace it fully. So if you embrace it fully, you already possess everything. Then you can't desire it because it's already you. So it's not about saying this is not me, so I chuck it. It's about saying this is also me, so why should I desire it? It's already inside me. So we are not saying about drying up desire, but we are saying about transforming the nature of desire. So when I'm really desiring something of the world, I can remind myself, but I desire the mother more. I desire her more. I desire the light more. And if I'm genuine in saying that, for example, Amai shared about his experience, when any desire haunts him, he can say no, but I want that experience more than this. Won't it ring true for you, Amai? Anything else you won't want as much as you want that. Or if you felt even one moment of real connectedness, remind yourself of that and tell yourself, I want that more, much more than I want this moment of desire. So transform the nature of your desire. That's a great way of overcoming desire. It's like removing a thorn with a thorn. This desire for the world is a thorn, but your desire for God or the light is the bigger thorn, which removes the earlier thorn.
Also, Ramana's way sometimes works, where you say who's actually desiring.
But we are not detouring into that today. So, every sincere and steadfast seeker will realize after some time, sooner or later, at times very soon, that this is an absolute truth, and that the delight felt in overcoming a desire is incomparably higher than the small pleasure, so fleeting and mixed, which may be found in the satisfaction of his desires. That is the second step. Naturally, with this continuous discipline, in a very short time, the desires will keep their distance and will no longer bother you. So you will be free to enter a little more deeply into your being and open yourself in an aspiration to the giver of delight, the divine element, the divine grace. And if this is done with a sincere self-giving, something that gives itself, offers itself, and expects nothing in exchange for its offering, one will feel that kind of sweet warmth, comfortable, intimate, radiant, which fills the heart and is the herald of delight. And after this, the path is easy. There comes a time when one begins to be almost ready, when one can feel in everything, every object, in every movement, in every vibration, in all the things around, not only people and conscious beings, but things, objects, not only trees and plants and living things, but simply any object one uses, the things around one, this delight of being just as one is, simply being. And one sees that all this vibrates like that. So Mother saying there comes a time when you hear the flute playing not only in your heart, but you'll feel the earth streaming out the flute, the walls, everything, because your inner vision will open to you hearing everything singing of God and everything telling you, look here, I'm God, I'm God, I'm God, everywhere. And that is the most delightful feeling in the world. And every other delight is so small in comparison. One touches a thing and feels this delight. But naturally, I say, one must have followed the discipline I spoke about at the beginning. Otherwise, so long as one has a desire, a preference, an attachment or affinities and repulsions and all that, one cannot. So Mother is saying a very beautiful thing. She has once said, the vibration of Ananda is one and the vibration of pleasure is one. The two cannot coexist. Pleasure comes when desires are fulfilled. Ananda comes when you step inside and feel a connection to your own light. Now, if you're feeling the vibration of pleasure, simultaneously you cannot feel Ananda. The two are very different. So the more you're willing to sacrifice the vibration of pleasure, the more you'll open to the vibration of Ananda. So once when Paramahansa Yogananda was asked that, how do all of you ascetics give up the world, give up family ties? How do you manage to sacrifice so much? So Paramahansa Yogananda smiled and said, I am not the one who sacrificed anything. You all who don't give all this up are the ones who've sacrificed your divine inheritance for baubles. I'm the one who has actually reached out and claimed my inheritance. I'm not the one who has sacrificed. You are the one who sacrificed. So, I know many of you are young and I know it's not so easy to turn your back on the world, and I'm not saying you should do it at one go, but at least also open your doors to light. Also at least remember there is something else which is within your reach if you reach out for it. So, and so long as one finds pleasure, well, yes, vital or physical pleasure in a thing, one cannot feel this delight. For this delight is everywhere. This delight is something very subtle. One moves in the midst of things, and it's as though they were all singing to you their delight. There comes a time when it becomes very familiar in the life around you. Of course, I must admit that it is a little more difficult to feel it in human beings because there are all their mental and vital formations which come into the field of perception and disturb it. There is too much of this kind of egoistic asperity which gets mixed up with things. So it is more difficult to contact the delight there. But even in animals one feels it. Those of us who are fond of animals, we love animals so much because somehow they have this delight very naturally. It is already a little more difficult than in plants. In plants, most of us love being in nature and greenery, right? Because plants naturally emanate this call of the flute. They speak all their joy, they express it. And as I said, in all familiar objects, the things around you which you use, there is a state of consciousness in which one is happy to be just as it is. So at that moment, one knows one has touched true delight, and it is not conditioned. I mean, it does not depend upon, it depends on nothing. It does not depend on outer circumstances, does not depend on a more or less favorable state. It does not depend on anything. It is a communion with the raison d'etre of the universe. It's a communion with the very force which is making the universe happen. And when this comes, it fills all the cells of the body. It is not even a thing which is thought out. One does not reason, does not analyze. It is not that. It is a state in which one lives. And when the body shares it, it is so fresh, so spontaneous. So when your mother says, no, you cannot live a truth till you feel it with the body. Hence, asana practice is so important for me, at least, because in asanas you actually get to live these truths, right? So this morning when we worked with the belts, we held the belt and tried to feel the God in it and then used it. So the whole asana changes, right? Because you're communicating with the props also as if they are gods. And then in life also, whatever the props you're using, they become your yogasana props. They are sacred. So, and when the body shares it, it is so fresh, so spontaneous. So, it no longer turns back upon itself. There is no longer any sense of self-observation, of self-analysis or analyzing things. All that is like a canticle of joyous vibrations, but very, very quiet, without violence, without passion, nothing at all. It is very subtle and very intense at the same time. And when it comes, it seems that the whole universe is a marvelous harmony. Even what is to the ordinary human consciousness ugly, unpleasant, appears marvelous. Unfortunately, as I said, people, circumstances, all that with all those mental and vital formations, that disturbs it all the time. Then one is obliged to return to this ignorant, blind perception of things. But otherwise, as soon as all this stops and one can get out of it, everything changes. As he says there at the end, everything changes. A marvelous harmony, and it is all delight, true delight, real delight. This demands a little work. And this discipline I spoke about, which one must undergo, if it is practiced with the aim of finding delight, the result is delayed. Yeah, what is the practice mother's speaking about? The dharma of the Gita, which we did last class. See me in everything, love me in everything, offer all that you do to me, and constantly stay in a state of bowing your head before me. Yeah? So then whatever I do, I don't do it for the ego. I do it for the God in myself, the God in everything around. I'm doing it in a state of constant self-giving. Then I don't need my meditation or my mantra to remind me of God. Everything I touch, feel, sense, taste is a reminder of God, because everything, something in me is reminding me this is also God, this is also God. And whatever I'm giving to anyone, I'm not giving from one ego to another. I'm giving from the God in myself to the God in that being. So that is the practice Mother's saying. And this is what opens you to the delight in existence. And this discipline I spoke about, which one must undergo, if it is practiced with the aim of finding delight, if you do it in order to be happy, you're doing it for your ego. And you can't fool God, no? You're not doing it for God, but you're doing it because Mother has said you'll be happy if you do it. So don't do it. So the starting point is actually to be besotted by God. Then everything falls into place. If you're simply and utterly and madly in love with God, and you can't make it happen and you can't fake it, right? Loving God is also His gift to you. It's a gift of grace. But if you're utterly and madly in love with God, then it becomes easy. Then you don't do it to benefit from your practice. You do it just for the joy of giving to somebody you love. Yeah? Like if you love your child, you won't think twice about taking a little detour to get her the snack she really wants. And you don't want anything in return. You do it because you love her unconditionally and you want to do it for her. Similarly, if you do everything in life for God out of that kind of unconditionality, then Mother says you're not asking for that delight, but the result is you get that delight. It comes. So if you do it for the delight, the result is delayed, for an egoistic element is introduced into it. It is done with an aim that is no longer an offering, it is a demand. And then it comes, it will come, even if it takes much longer. Then one asks nothing, expects nothing, hopes for nothing. When it is simply that, it is self-giving and aspiration, and the spontaneous need without any bargaining. Not that I'm doing this for you, give me this back. Not like that. The need to be divine, that's all. In quietness, you will feel the divine force, help and protection are always with you. It is in quietness, peace and silence that the spiritual force acts. All agitation and excitement come from an adverse influence. So, whenever there's difficulty, the first thing is make yourself quiet. That's the best way of a quiet cheerfulness, the title of this talk. Become quiet and find your inner smile of faith. Do these two and Mother will handle the difficulty. It is in quietness, peace and silence that the spiritual forces act. All agitation and excitement come from an adverse influence. It is not in the outward circumstances that you must look for quietness. It is from deep inside yourself. Deep inside the being, there is a peace that brings quietness in the whole being down to the body. If we allow it to do so, it is that peace you must seek, and then you will get the quietness you wish for. What must I do to accept the peace and quietness and calm? Mother answers, want them sincerely. The point is we don't want it. How the Gopas didn't want to, how the villagers didn't want to go and listen to Krishna's flute. Many of us, or many times, we don't want it. Not only to want it sincerely and integrally, not with one part of your being, but with the vital also, with the physical also. A strong being is always quiet. It is weakness that causes restlessness. Okay, then we come to the Savitri lines. So skip the next few till you come to Savitri, page 27. Beautiful lines. The cosmos is no accident in time. Okay, the cosmos is the world at large. It is no accident in time. It's not, again, he keeps repeating this. Somewhere else he said, alive in a dead rotating universe. We whirl not here upon a casual globe. It's not casual, not something that thought hasn't been put into, abandoned to a task beyond our force, even through the tangled anarchy called fate, and through the bitterness of death and fall, an outstretched hand is felt upon our lives. It is near to us in numberless bodies and births. So the cosmos is no accident in time. There is a meaning in each play of chance. There is a freedom in each face of fate. So there is a meaning in each play of chance. You feel it's by chance that this has happened or that has happened, but there is a meaning in it. It's not happened randomly. There is a freedom in each face of fate. What is the freedom in each face of fate? Fate is what happens to you. You have the choice of either grumbling and saying ouch, or smiling with an ah. If I've been taken to it, I'll be taken through it. And if you have that smile, the very outcome will change. If you grumble, there'll be one outcome. If you have a smiling, quiet cheerfulness, there'll be another outcome. So there is a freedom in each face of fate. It's such a beautiful line, worth learning up. There is a freedom in each face of fate. A wisdom knows and guides the mysteried world. A truth gaze shapes its beings and events. A wisdom knows and guides this mysteried world. It's a mystery to our mind because we can't understand it. But it's not a mystery to that higher intelligence. It knows what it's doing. So that beautiful line from Life Divine, what's magic to the finite intelligence is the logic of the infinite. It's logical that it should be thus. How the opening comes. First of all, you must feel the need for it. This is the most important point. It is to have a certain inner humility which makes you aware of your helplessness without the grace. That truly without it you are incomplete and powerless. This, to begin with, is the first thing. It is an inner experience we can very well have. When you see even people who know nothing find themselves in quite difficult circumstances or facing a problem which must be solved, or as I told you, an impulse which must be overcome, or something that has disturbed them, and then they realize they are lost, they don't know what to do. Neither their mind nor their will nor their feelings help. They don't know what to do, then it happens. There is within them something like a kind of call, a call to something which you can do a call to something which can do what one cannot. One aspires to something which is capable of doing what one can't do. That is the first condition. And then if you become aware that it is only grace that can do that, that situation in which you find yourself, from there the grace alone can pull you out, can give you the solution and the strength to come out of it. Then quite naturally an intense aspiration awakens in you, a consciousness which is translated into an opening. Many of you find that the best in you comes out when the rubber hits the road. It's so sad that we live like that, because then you realize your helplessness. You realize you can't do anything on your own. And then that's when a real intense call to the divine comes up, and the best in you comes forward and opens to the light. So Mother says how to open to the light. First, to realize that by yourself you're helpless in life, and that shouldn't scare you, that should empower you. It's okay to be helpless. What's holding me is all powerful, and that is not helpless, right? I have a soul within and grace above. And then to open with an intensity to the light. And later you must pay great attention to this. Mother puts a finger on her lips, the grace will answer you. The grace will pull you out of the trouble. The grace will give you the solution to your problem or will help you to get out of your difficulty. And once you're free from trouble and have come out of your difficulties, don't forget that it is the grace which pulled you out, and don't think it is yourself. The ego will often think, wow, I was so strong, I was so capable. But it wasn't you, it's grace that acted to you, through you. For this indeed is the important point. And it's not enough to vaguely feel gratitude. Make it a habit to articulate the gratitude. Otherwise, we are in a habit of taking grace very much for granted. We feel relief and that's it. And then we forget. But actually sit down before Mother's picture, actually formulate your gratitude in words. Not that Mother needs it, but it will fill you with joy and it will strengthen the vasana, the karmic blueprint of gratitude. We are constantly creating negative karmic blueprints. Gratitude can also be a karmic blueprint. So every time, for little things, make it a habit to articulate the grace. Because the moment you think that sentence of gratitude, you'll feel the gratitude more strongly. Most people, as soon as the difficulty is gone, says, after all, I pulled out myself out of the difficulty quite well. There you are, and you lock and bolt the door. So the moment, if you have gratitude, you've kept the door open. But if you start feeling, wow, I was so good, you've closed the door again. And you cannot receive anything anymore. You need once again some acute anguish, some terrible difficulty for this kind of inner stupidity to give way, and for you to realize once more that you can do nothing. How many of us identify with this inner stupidity? Lots of us, right? We only turn to grace when we are in difficulty, and once we are out of it, we feel relief, that's all. But we don't remember with gratitude how much grace went into pulling us out of it. Because it is only when you grow aware that you are powerless that you begin to be just a little open and plastic. That feeling powerless is actually a source of great strength, because you realize the huge power which is behind you. I know somebody, a grown-up person, who always refers to Mother as most powerful mummy. He feels so intimate with her that he doesn't call her mother, he calls her mummy. And most powerful. So anything happens, his sentence is, my most powerful mummy is there. Don't mess with me, I have a most powerful mummy. That should be your attitude, the attitude of a child who knows that that very powerful person, being, whatever, is behind you and has your back. But so long as you think that what you do depends on your own skill and your own capacity, truly, not only do you close one door, but you close lots of doors, one upon the other, and bolt them. You shut yourself up in a fortress and nothing can enter there. That is the great drawback. One forgets very quickly. Quite naturally, one is satisfied with one's own capacity. Question: but Mother, even when one tries to think that one is powerless, there is something which believes one is powerful. So, isn't it true? Even if I feel I'm powerless, I have great ego about my capacities. Yes, it is very difficult to be sincere. That is why the blows multiply, sometimes become terrible, because that's the only thing which breaks your stupidity. This is the justification fork of calamities. Only when you are in an acutely painful situation, and indeed before something that affects you deeply, then that makes the stupidity melt away a little. But as you say, even when there is something that melts, there is still a little something which remains inside, and that is why it lasts so long. How many blows are needed in life for one to know to the very depths that one is nothing, that one can do nothing, that one does not exist, that one is nothing, that there is no entity without the divine consciousness and the grace. From the moment one knows it, it is over. All difficulties have gone. When one knows it integrally and there is nothing which resists, but till that moment, and it takes a long time. So Mother's saying something very beautiful. She's saying, if you want to feel all powerful, allow yourself to be completely helpless, helpless before the divine, right? Don't get into the ego of your own capacities. Your capacities are also gifts from the divine. They've given you today, tomorrow they'll be taken away. And if you rely on them alone, your success will always be very partial. But with whatever capacities and incapacities, make Sri Aurobindo your role model. He's the elite of humanity, right? Nobody I know was more gifted than him. But what does he write? I am the meteor dust of your flaming grace. Such humility in such a superior being. So let's role model our Guru even a little bit to constantly remind ourselves, whatever I do well, I'm only the meteor dust of your flaming grace. And to be grateful for anything, for my successes, to be grateful instead of being arrogant. I couldn't have done it without grace, whatever my capacities. And for my failures also to be grateful, because my failures are stepping stones to success. Right? So with that, let's sit quietly. Hands together in a namaste at the heart. Take a long, slow inhalation. Breathe out with Om. But before we do our Oms, let's make a collective aspiration to live today's talk. Whatever the difficulties, may we all have a quiet cheerfulness. May we all find the smiling faith within, which is confidence in grace, that if I've been taken to it, I'll be taken through it. To not buckle before the appearance of life. To not tell God, I have such a big problem, but to smile at the problem and tell it, I have such a big God. And to know that if I stay in the right consciousness, solving the difficulty is up to grace. And whenever I come out of a difficulty, to not take grace for granted, to always articulate my gratitude in a sentence so it stays deep inside me, and to always remember that I never succeed through my own capacities alone. Whatever my capacity, it's the breath of grace that brings me success. So to emulate Gurudev, when he says, Sri Aurobindo says, I am the meteor dust, just dust, of his flaming grace. And with that aspiration, may she make it come true for all of us. 3 Oms.